What if one small act of kindness, an act that cost you your job, could change your life forever? For Amelia Vance, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in debt, helping a disheveled drunk man get to his hotel room, was just another Tuesday night in the heart of New York City. She expected a reprimand from her tyrannical manager, maybe even to be fired. She never expected the man to be Alexander Sterling, the enigmatic and reclusive billionaire who owned the very hotel chain she worked for. And she certainly never imagined that her simple act of human decency would, 1 week later, lead to an announcement that would not only stun her, but leave the Owne city utterly speechless. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story of what happens when integrity meets immense power. The Grand Elysian Hotel on Park Avenue wasn't just a building. It was a testament to old New York wealth, a monolith of marble and gold that stood defiant against the city's relentless modernity. Inside its opulent walls, time seemed to slow, and the air itself felt heavier, scented with money perfume, and the faint, clean aroma of fresh lilies that were replaced daily in the lobby. For the guests, it was a sanctuary. For the staff, it was a gilded cage. Amelia Mia Vance knew the cage better than anyone. For 3 years, she had navigated its intricate corridors and unspoken rules. Her black and white uniform, a second skin. Her smile, practiced and perfect, was her shield. It hid the exhaustion of 12-hour shifts, the gnawing anxiety of her mother's mounting medical bills, and the slow, crushing death of her own dreams of one day owning a small, sunlit bakery. Tonight, a Tuesday in late October, was particularly brutal. A fine, chilling rain slicked the Manhattan streets, and every guest who entered the Onyx Lounge, the hotel's famously dim and expensive bar, seemed to bring the city's foul mood in with them. Mia moved like a phantom between the low-slung velvet chairs and dark wood tables, her tray a silver extension of her arm. She refilled glasses of $300 Macallan, delivered plates of overpriced truffle fries, and absorbed the passive-aggressive complaints of hedge fund managers and their surgically enhanced companions. Her supervisor, Mr. Davies, was prowling the perimeter. He was a man whose ambition had far outstripped his talent, leaving him perpetually bitter. He had thinning hair, slicked back with too much product, and a gaze that always seemed to be calculating an employee's cost versus benefit ratio. He thrived on catching mistakes. "Vance," he hissed, his voice a dry whisper as she passed the service station. "Table 7. Another Elysian old-fashioned." And smile. "You look like you're contemplating your own mortality." "Yes, Mr. Davies," Mia replied, her voice smooth and even betraying none of the retort she was screaming in her head. She turned to the bar, relayed the order to the bartender, a grizzled veteran named Sal, and allowed her shoulders to slump for a fraction of a second. "Rough one?" Sal grunted, polishing a glass until it squeaked. "Just another Tuesday in paradise." Mia murmured, her eyes scanning the lounge. That's when she saw him. He was in the darkest corner of the room, at a small table meant for 2, though he was utterly alone. He hadn't ordered anything. He hadn't spoken to anyone. He had simply appeared. Unlike the other patrons preening in their bespoke suits and designer dresses, this man was a study in disarray. His dark, expensive-looking suit was rumpled, the tie loosened and askew. His hair, a thicket of dark brown with the first hints of silver at the temples, was unkempt, but it was his face that held Mia's attention. He was staring down into an empty water glass with an intensity that was unnerving his jaw, tight with a pain so profound it seemed to radiate from him in cold waves. He wasn't drunk in the loud, boisterous way of the finance bros at the bar. He was submerged in something far deeper and more destructive. Mia had seen all kinds of intoxication in her years at the hotel, but this was different. This was grief. For an hour she watched him out of the corner of her eye. He didn't move, save for the occasional, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand. The other servers avoided him. He was a problem waiting to happen, a non-paying customer taking up prime real estate. Mr. Davies was already eyeing him with a predator's focus. Vance Davies snapped, appearing at her elbow again. "The ghost in the corner. Go deal with it. He's been nursing that water for an hour. Either he orders something substantial, or he's out. We're not a shelter." "He doesn't seem to be bothering anyone, sir," Mia said softly. Davies's eyes narrowed. "Is that a challenge to my authority?" "No, sir. Of course not." "Good. Get him out. Be discreet, but be firm. If he refuses, I'll have security handle it." Davies smirked. "And we both know how much Mr. Henderson in security enjoys his job." Mia's stomach tightened. Henderson was a bully who took pleasure in manhandling people. The thought of him putting his hands on the broken man in the corner filled her with a sudden, fierce protectiveness. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her uniform and walked towards the table. As she approached, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 40s, with a face that, if not for the raw sorrow etched into it, would have been devastatingly handsome. Strong jaw, straight nose, high cheekbones. But his eyes, when he finally lifted them to look at her, were what stopped her cold. They were a startling shade of grey, like a stormy sea, and they were utterly lost. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice gentle. "My name is Amelia. Can I get you anything to drink, or perhaps see the menu?" He blinked slowly, as if her words were travelling a great distance to reach him. His voice, when it came, was a low, rough rasp, gravelly from disuse, and thick with something that sounded like unshed tears. "No, thank you. Are you a guest at the hotel, sir?" She pressed as kindly as she could. He gave a short, bitter laugh that held no humour. "A guest." He repeated the words, tasting like poison in his mouth. "You could say that. It's getting late, sir. And this table." Mia trailed off, hating the words she was being forced to say. "You want me to leave?" he stated, his gaze dropping back to the empty glass. It wasn't a question. Mr. Davies was watching his arms, crossed, a smug look on his face. Mia knew she had two choices: obey, and have this man thrown out onto the rainy street, or defy her manager and risk her job. Looking at the profound desolation in the man's eyes, the choice was surprisingly easy. Her job paid the bills, but it was slowly killing her soul. What was one more push towards the edge? "Actually," Mia said, her tone shifting from polite server to concerned human being, "what I want is to make sure you're all right. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." His head snapped up, his stormy eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, a flicker of something other than pain crossed his face, surprise. "You don't have a room here, do you?" she asked quietly. "You just walked in." He didn't answer, but his silence was a confession. "Okay," she said, making a decision that felt both terrifying and right. "Stay right here. Don't move." She turned on her heel and walked directly to Mr. Davies. "Sir, the gentleman is a guest. He's in the celestial penthouse. He just came down for some air and is feeling unwell. I'm going to escort him back to his room." Davies's face contorted with suspicion. The Celestial Penthouse was the most exclusive suite in the hotel, often reserved for royalty or titans of industry. It was currently listed as Owner's Block. Do not book. The penthouse. Don't lie to me, Vance. That suite is blocked. The system must be mistaken. Mia bluffed her heart, pounding against her ribs. He confirmed the name on the reservation. Mr. Sterling. She plucked the name from thin air, recalling it from a business magazine she'd glanced at. Davies hesitated. The name Alexander Sterling was whispered in the halls of the Elysian Group, with a mixture of fear and reverence. He was the mythical, unseen owner of the entire global chain. The idea of him sitting disheveled in their lounge seemed preposterous, but the potential fallout of disrespecting him, if it was true, was catastrophic. Davies was a coward above all else. Fine, he conceded, his voice tight. But if there's any trouble, it's on your head. Your job is on the line. Understood, sir, Maya said, turning away before he could see the tremor in her hands. She returned to the man's table. All right, she said softly. Let's get you home. He looked at her. His brows furrowed in confusion. I know, she cut him off gently. Just trust me. We're going to the penthouse. Slowly, as if his limbs were made of lead, he rose to his feet. He was taller than she'd expected, and he swayed slightly. Mia moved to his side, instinctively putting a hand on his arm to steady him. He flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. The fabric of his suit was fine Italian wool, now hopelessly creased. Thank you, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. We're not there yet, she replied, her own voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Let's go. Together they walked out of the Onyx lounge, leaving a stunned Mr. Davies and a room full of curious socialites in their wake. Mia Vance, the waitress, was escorting a ghost, and she had no idea she was walking straight into the heart of a storm that would change everything. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent and suffocating. The mirrored walls reflected the bizarre pairing Mia in her crisp, functional uniform, and the tall, broken man leaning ever so slightly against the brass railing for support. The scent of expensive whiskey and something achingly sad clung to him. Mia kept her eyes fixed on the ascending floor numbers, her mind racing. What was she doing? She was lying to her boss, breaking at least a dozen hotel protocols, and escorting a complete stranger to the most expensive suite in New York City, a suite she had no way of actually getting into. The elevator chimed softly, and the doors opened directly into a private marble foyer. Before them stood a single imposing set of double doors. This was it, the Celestial Penthouse. And of course it was locked. A discreet gold plate on the wall required a special keycard. Key, the man slurred, gesturing vaguely at the door. Right, Mia said, her heart sinking. The key. She had gambled everything on a bluff, and now it was time to fold. She would have to take him back down, admit she'd lied, and face the consequences. She was about to suggest they go back to the lobby when the man fumbled inside his suit jacket. His hand emerged unsteady, clutching not a key card, but a worn leather wallet. He opened it, and a small laminated photograph fell to the plush carpet. Mia bent down to pick it up. It was a picture of a woman with a dazzling smile and a little girl with bright, laughing eyes, her hair in pigtails. They were on a sailboat, the sun catching the spray of the ocean behind them. The man's breath hitched. He reached for the photo with a desperate urgency, his fingers brushing hers. His touch was cold. "Lily." He whispered the name, a raw, open wound. "My Lily." And Rose. Maya looked from the photo to his ravaged face. The grief she had sensed before was now laid bare, a palpable force in the small foyer. This wasn't just a man having a bad day. This was a man who had lost his world. "They're beautiful," Mia said, softly handing him the picture. He stared at it, his thumb stroking the smiling face of the little girl. He seemed to forget where he was, who she was. He then fumbled in his wallet again, and to Mia's astonishment pulled out a sleek black keycard. It was the master key for the penthouse. He swayed, trying to aim the card at the reader. After 2 failed attempts, Mia gently took it from his hand. "Allow me." She swiped the card. A green light blinked, and a soft click echoed in the foyer. The heavy doors swung inward. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the suite stunned Mia into silence. The entire east wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a jaw-dropping panorama of the Manhattan skyline, the lights of the city glittering like a carpet of scattered diamonds. A grand piano stood in one corner, a sprawling white sofa in the center, and a spiral staircase leading to an upper level. The air was still the space immaculate, as if no one had lived in it for a very long time. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum with a view. She guided him inside, and he collapsed onto the massive sofa, his head falling into his hands. He let out a shuddering sigh that seemed to drain the last of his energy. "Can I get you some water?" Mia asked, her voice echoing in the vast room. He nodded mutely. Mia found the kitchen a marvel of stainless steel and black granite that looked like it had never been used. She filled a glass with cold water from the sub-zero fridge, her mind struggling to process the situation. Who was this man? He had a key. He knew the names on the photo. He was meant to be here. Had she stumbled into the truth by complete accident? She returned and placed the glass on the marble coffee table in front of him. He didn't reach for it. He was still staring at the photograph, which he'd placed on the table. "Today is..." He started, his voice thick. It was today. 5 years. Mia didn't need to ask what he meant. The anniversary. The accident. The sailboat in the picture. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "I'm so sorry," she said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate. He looked up at her, his grey eyes clearing for a moment, focusing on her with a startling lucidity. "Why did you help me?" Mia hesitated. "You looked like you needed it." "People like me," he said, a note of self-loathing in his tone, "are usually thrown out. I was being a nuisance." "You were being sad," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." A long silence stretched between them. The city lights twinkled outside, oblivious. He finally picked up the water, his hand steadier now, and drank half of it in one go. "Thank you, Amelia," he said, her name sounding strange and formal in this cavernous room. "You should get some rest, Mr. Sterling," she said, using the name she'd invented, now suspecting it might be real. He gave another one of those mirthless smiles. "Sterling," he repeated softly. "Yes, I should rest." Mia knew this was her cue to leave. She had done her part. He was safe. She backed away toward the door. "Good night, sir." He didn't reply. He was already lost again, his gaze fixed on the photograph on the table. Mia let herself out the heavy door, closing with a quiet final thud. As she rode the elevator down, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold dread. She had been gone from her post for nearly 30 minutes. Mr. Davies would be waiting. And he was. He stood near the service station. His arms crossed his face, a mask of triumphant fury. The moment she stepped off the elevator, he was on her. "Well, well, well," he sneered, his voice low and venomous, so the nearby guests couldn't overhear. "The humanitarian returns. So tell me, Vance, was the celestial penthouse up to the standards of your newfound friend? He's a guest, Mr. Davies." "He needed assistance," Mia said, her chin held high. "He's a drunk who should be on the street," Davies hissed. "And you lied to me. You undermined my authority. You abandoned your post. You broke a dozen rules." He took a step closer, his cologne acrid and overwhelming. "I checked the master logs. That suite is blocked for Alexander Sterling, the owner. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound? Believing a common drunk could be him." "It doesn't matter who he is," Mia said, her voice shaking slightly, but her resolve firming. "He's a person who was hurting, and our job is hospitality. Our job," Davies spat, "is to make money. And you are no longer a part of it. You're fired, Vance. Effective immediately. Get your things from your locker and be out of my hotel in 10 minutes. Security will escort you." The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. Just like that. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. The rent, the pharmacy co-pays for her mother, the grocery bills, it all flashed through her mind in a sickening kaleidoscope of panic. She had known it was a risk, but the reality of it was devastating. "You can't," she whispered more to herself than to him. "I just did," he said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Now get out." He turned and walked away, already dismissing her from his mind. Mia stood frozen for a moment. The sounds of the lounge, the clinking glasses, the low murmur of conversation, the soft jazz, all seeming to come from a great distance. Sal, the bartender, caught her eye and gave her a grim, sympathetic nod. Numbly, she walked to the staff locker room in the basement. She changed out of her uniform, the familiar fabric now feeling foreign and alien. She packed her few belongings into her tote bag, her well-worn copy of Kitchen Confidential, a spare pair of comfortable shoes, a photo of her and her mom. As she closed the locker door for the last time, the finality of it washed over her. A security guard, not Henderson, thankfully, but a younger, kinder-looking man, was waiting to walk her to the staff exit. He didn't speak, for which Mia was grateful. She stepped out into the back alley, the cold October rain hitting her face. It mingled with the hot tears that now tracked freely down her cheeks. The dream of the bakery, her mother's security, her entire life in New York. It all felt like it was dissolving in the downpour. She had done the right thing. She knew it in her bones. But as she stood alone in the dark alley, with the imposing form of the Grand Elysian looming behind her, all she could feel was the crushing weight of her good deed. She had helped a lost soul find his room, and in return, she had lost everything. The week that followed was a blur of grey despair. Mia woke up each morning with a jolt of panic, the phantom sensation of her waitress apron still tied around her waist, only to be hit by the crushing reality of her situation. She spent her days scouring online job boards, sending out dozens of resumes for positions at bistros, diners, and coffee shops. Anything that would keep the lights on. The replies were few and far between. The New York hospitality industry was notoriously competitive, and being fired from a place like the Grand Elysian, even without a bad reference, was a black mark. Her savings, meager as they were dwindling at an alarming rate. She started watering down the soup and skipping meals to make sure there was enough for her mother's next prescription. During her daily calls with her mum, who lived upstate, she feigned cheerfulness, talking about a supposed week off she was enjoying. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. The man from the penthouse, Mr. Sterling or whoever he was, never crossed her mind. He was a spectre from a different life, the catalyst for her downfall, but not someone she expected to ever see or hear from again. He was a problem for the rich, and she was back firmly in the world of the poor. On the 8th day after she was fired, exactly 1 week later, an envelope arrived. It was thick, creamy cardstock, a stark contrast to the junk mail and final notice bills it was nestled amongst. Her name and address were written in elegant, flowing calligraphy. There was no return address, only the embossed crest of the Grand Elysian Hotel on the wax seal. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Was it a final paycheck? A legal notice? With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Inside was a single heavy card. Ms. Amelia Vance, you are hereby requested to attend a mandatory all-staff assembly in the Grand Ballroom of the Grand Elysian Hotel. Date, Wednesday, November 5th. Time, 10:00 a.m. Sharp. Your presence is required. Office of the CEO, Elysian Group Holdings. Mia read it 3 times, an all-staff assembly. But she wasn't staff anymore. And the summons was from the highest possible office, the CEO of the entire parent company. It made no sense. A cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. Maybe they were suing her for fraud or for accessing the penthouse. Maybe Mr. Davies had spun some elaborate tale to cover his own incompetence and had painted her as a corporate spouse. Her first instinct was to throw it away, to ignore it, and sever her last tie to that place. But the words, "Your presence is required," held a weight that was impossible to dismiss. It felt less like an invitation and more like a court summons. Besides, what more could they do to her? She had nothing left to lose. On Wednesday morning, she put on the nicest outfit she owned, a simple black dress and a worn but clean blazer. It felt like armor. She took the subway to Park Avenue, the familiar journey now feeling surreal. As she approached the grand entrance of the hotel, the doorman, a kind man named George, tipped his hat to her, with a look of surprise and confusion. "Miss Vance." "Good to see you," he said. His brow furrowed. "You too." "George," she replied, offering a weak smile. The grand ballroom was on the 2nd floor. As Mia entered, she was met with a sea of familiar faces. The entire hotel staff was there, from housekeeping and kitchen porters to concierges and management. They were clustered in anxious groups, whispering amongst themselves. The air was thick with tension and speculation. A rumor had circulated that a corporate takeover was happening, that there would be massive layoffs. Mia spotted Mr. Davies near the front, schmoozing with some of the other department heads. He looked smug and important, as if he were in on a secret no one else knew. When he saw Mia, his face flickered with shock, then morphed into a contemptuous sneer. He strode over to her, his posture radiating authority. "What are you doing here, Vance?" he demanded in a low voice. "This is for current employees only. I told you to get out." "I was summoned," Mia said, holding up the invitation. Davies snatched it from her, his eyes widening slightly as he saw the CEO's office seal. He quickly handed it back, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "A clerical error, no doubt. You can wait by the door. You'll be asked to leave soon enough." He turned his back on her and walked away, dismissing her once more. Mia found a spot against the back wall, feeling completely out of place. She felt hundreds of eyes on her former colleagues, whispering and pointing. She was the pariah, the fired waitress who had dared to show her face again. At precisely 10:00 a.m., the ballroom doors at the front of the room opened. A group of men and one woman in severe dark business suits walked in and took their places on the small stage that had been set up. They looked like a pack of sharks, lean, hungry, and utterly ruthless. The room fell silent. One of the men with slicked-back silver hair and piercing blue eyes stepped up to the podium. His suit was so perfectly tailored, it looked like it was molded to him. "Good morning," he said, his voice crisp and carrying an Ivy League accent. "My name is Julian Croft. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Elysian Group Holdings. Thank you all for assembling on such short notice. We are here today to address the future of this flagship hotel." A wave of nervous murmurs rippled through the crowd. For too long, Croft continued, his voice sharp as steel. "The Elysian Group has been managed from a distance. Decisions have been made based on profit and loss statements, on data points and market analysis. We have focused on the balance sheet, and I fear we have lost sight of our soul. Our founder's vision was not just to build luxury hotels, but to create havens of genuine hospitality. That vision has faltered." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Mr. Davies was nodding along, looking pious. To that end, Croft said the owner and CEO of Elysian Group Holdings, Mr. Alexander Sterling, has decided to take a more hands-on approach. He is here today to address you himself. A collective gasp went through the room. Alexander Sterling was a legend, a ghost. He hadn't made a public appearance in 5 years. Most of the staff believed he was just a name on a letterhead. The side door to the stage opened, and the man who walked out was the man from the Onyx Lounge. He was transformed. The rumpled suit was gone, replaced by an immaculately tailored charcoal grey one. The unkempt hair was perfectly styled. The drunken haze was gone, and the devastating grief was now banked behind a firewall of immense power and control. But the eyes were the same. The stormy grey eyes that had looked so lost and broken a week ago were now sharp, intelligent, and commanding. He moved with the quiet, predatory grace of a man who owned every room he ever entered. He was Alexander Sterling. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. Her knees went weak, and she gripped the wall for support. The drunk. The ghost. The man she had saved from being thrown out on the street was the billionaire owner of the entire company. A wave of shock and recognition washed over the room as people who had been in the lounge that night realized who they were looking at. Mia saw Mr. Davies's face go completely white. The blood drained from it so fast he looked like a corpse. His smug confidence evaporated, replaced by sheer animal terror. He was looking at Mia, his eyes wide with horrified understanding. Sterling walked to the podium, displacing Julian Croft with a simple, authoritative nod. He scanned the crowd, his gaze sweeping over every face. For a fleeting moment, his eyes met Mia's at the back of the room. There was no recognition, no acknowledgement. Nothing. It was as if he'd never seen her before. The tiny, foolish flicker of hope in her chest died. "Good morning," Sterling began, his voice the same deep rasp she remembered, but now imbued with a chilling authority. "Who was Mr. Croft stated, I have been absent. 5 years ago, I suffered a personal tragedy, and I stepped away from the world. I let others run my company. I trusted them to uphold the values upon which it was built. He paused, his gaze slowly falling upon Mr. Davies, who seemed to shrink under the weight of it. I was wrong to trust them. Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. I recently decided to see for myself what my hotels have become. So 1 week ago tonight, I came into this hotel, not as the owner, but as a man in pain. I sat in the Onyx lounge looking for, I don't know what, solace, perhaps. And I observed a staff that has been trained to see guests not as people, but as problems or profit centers. And I observed a manager who embodies the very worst of that corporate rot. He pointed a finger directly at Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, would you please step forward? Davies looked like he was going to be physically ill. He shuffled forward, his expensive shoes scuffing on the floor, his face slick with sweat. Mr. Davies, Sterling said, his voice resonating with cold fury. You saw a man who was clearly distressed, and your only instinct was to have him thrown out. You value a table's revenue over a human being's dignity. You foster a culture of fear and intimidation, not hospitality. You are a disgrace to the Elysian name. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Mr. Croft has your severance package. Security will escort you from the premises. Now. Davies opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but no sound came out. 2 formidable security guards, the same ones who would have been called on Sterling a week ago, materialized and flanked him. They gently but firmly guided the utterly broken man out of the ballroom. A stunned, terrified silence filled the room. Alexander Sterling had just publicly executed the hotel manager. His gaze returned to the crowd. This is a message. The rot stops today. We will return to our founding principles. Integrity, compassion, hospitality. And that brings me to the real reason we are all here. His stormy grey eyes scanned the crowd once more, and this time they locked directly onto Mia's. Miss Amelia Vance, he called out, his voice clear and unwavering. Please come forward. Every single head in the ballroom swiveled to stare at her. The whispers started a tidal wave of confusion and shock. Numbly, as if in a dream, Mia pushed herself off the wall and began the long walk to the front of the room. The walk from the back of the ballroom to the stage felt like a mile. Every eye was on Mia, 1,000 questions hanging in the silent, charged air. Her former colleagues, the ones who had whispered about her and watched her get fired, now stared with a mixture of awe, confusion, and dawning respect. She kept her gaze fixed on Alexander Sterling, the man who was both a complete stranger and the most familiar person in the room. As she reached the bottom of the stage steps, he came down to meet her, extending a hand. His grip was firm and warm, a stark contrast to the cold, trembling hand she had held a week ago. He led her up onto the stage, positioning her beside him at the podium. She stood there, a simple girl in a second-hand blazer, next to one of the most powerful men in the world. The moment felt utterly surreal, like a page torn from a bizarre novel. Sterling turned back to the stunned audience. 1 week ago, when I was at my lowest, when I was nothing more than a nameless, troublesome drunk, only one person in this entire establishment showed me a shred of human decency. His voice, amplified by the microphone, filled every corner of the room. Every other employee either ignored me or saw me as a nuisance to be removed. Manager Davies ordered me to be thrown out. But Miss Vance, she saw a person in pain. She risked her job defying a direct order from her superior, not for personal gain, but because it was the right thing to do. She acted with integrity, compassion, and a fundamental understanding of what hospitality truly means. An understanding that everyone in management, myself included, seems to have forgotten. He turned his head slightly to look at Mia, and for the first time she saw not the billionaire CEO or the broken drunk, but the man behind them both. There was gratitude in his grey eyes, and a deep, soul-weary sadness that hadn't entirely vanished. For her compassion, Sterling announced, turning back to the microphone, Ms. Vance was fired. A collective gasp, louder this time, rippled through the staff. They had all assumed Davies had fired her for some major infraction. The truth sent a shockwave through the room. She was punished for embodying the very core value this company claims to champion. Sterling continued, his voice laced with iron. This is not just an error. This is a systemic failure. A failure of leadership. A failure that starts at the very top. With me. He let that admission hang in the air, a stunning confession of culpability from a man of his stature. Actions have consequences, he said, his tone shifting. Mr. Davies has faced the consequences of his actions, and now Ms. Vance will face the consequences of hers. Mia's heart hammered. What did he mean? A promotion, a bonus, a formal apology. She could never have prepared herself for what came next. Sterling looked at Julian Croft, his COO, who stepped forward and handed him a thick, leather-bound portfolio. Sterling opened it on the podium. The Grand Elysian New York is more than just our flagship. It is the heart of our brand, Sterling declared. And a heart must be strong and pure. It cannot be run by spreadsheets from a corporate office hundreds of miles away. It needs a leader who is on the ground, who understands its pulse, who leads with empathy and courage. He paused, taking a deep breath before delivering the final earth-shattering blow. Therefore, effective immediately, I am enacting a transfer of ownership for this specific hotel. The Grand Elysian New York will no longer be corporately owned by Elysian Group Holdings. It will be franchised to a new independent owner. He looked directly at Mia, his voice softening but losing none of its power. Ms. Amelia Vance, for your integrity, for your courage, and for reminding me what it means to be human. I am making you that owner. I am giving you this hotel. Silence. A complete, total, and absolute silence fell over the grand ballroom. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. No one breathed. No one moved. The concept was too enormous, too utterly insane to process. Mia stared at him, her mind a complete blank. The words echoed in her head, but failed to form a coherent thought. Owner, giving you this hotel. It was impossible. A joke, a dream, a psychotic break. Then the whispers began like a gathering storm. Did he say, owner? The whole hotel? To the waitress. Sterling held up a hand, and the room fell silent again. Let me be clear, he said, anticipating the disbelief. This is not a stunt. This is a restructuring. A trust has been established in Ms. Vance's name to fund the franchise acquisition from the parent company. A transaction that is for all legal purposes complete. She will hold the controlling interest and full operational authority. She is the new owner and general manager of the Grand Elysian New York. My team and I will serve in an advisory capacity for the first year to ensure a smooth transition, but the final decisions will be hers. He closed the portfolio and handed it to Mia. Her hands took it automatically, but her fingers felt numb. It was heavy, filled with legal documents, deeds, and corporate charters. It felt like the heaviest thing in the world. You can't be serious," Mia whispered the first words she had managed to utter. Her voice was a tiny, trembling thing in the vast silence. "I have never been more serious in my life," Sterling replied, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "I lost my way, Amelia. I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline without even knowing it. You didn't save a billionaire. You saved a man. Money is the only tool I have to repay a debt that is immeasurable. Use it. Make this place something to be proud of." He then turned back to the dumbfounded staff. "Your new boss," he announced, gesturing to Mia, "is one of you. She has cleaned your toilets, served your tables, and dealt with your complaints. She knows this hotel, its flaws and its strengths better than any executive ever could. She will have my full backing and the complete resources of the Elysian Group at her disposal. Anyone who cannot give her their absolute loyalty and respect can collect their severance from Mr. Croft on their way out." With that, he gave a final sharp nod, turned and strode off the stage, his legal team following in his wake like a procession of shadows. He left behind a ballroom in chaos, and a young woman on the stage holding the deed to a billion-dollar hotel her world irrevocably and terrifyingly shattered and rebuilt in the space of 10 minutes. Mia stood frozen, clutching the portfolio to her chest. The silence broke, and the room erupted into a cacophony of sound. Some staff members were applauding a slow, hesitant clap at first, which then grew into a thunderous ovation. Others were staring in slack-jawed disbelief. A few, the ones loyal to Davies, looked resentful and furious. The press, who had been tipped off about a major announcement and held outside, were now swarming in camera flashes starting to pop like fireworks. "Ms. Vance, over here. What are you going to do first?" "Amelia, can you give us a statement?" The noise, the lights, the sheer impossibility of it all crashed down on her. Her vision swam. The weight of the portfolio, the weight of 1,000 employees, the weight of a Park Avenue landmark, all settled on her shoulders. She felt a hand on her arm and turned to see Sal, the old bartender, standing beside her, having come up on stage. "Breathe, kid," he said, his gruff voice a comforting anchor in the storm. "Just breathe. Looks like you've got a hell of a job ahead of you." Mia looked out at the sea of faces, at the flashing cameras, at the grand, opulent room that was now hers. She was no longer Mia Vance, the struggling waitress. She was Amelia Vance, the owner of the Grand Elysian. And she was terrified. The 24 hours following the announcement were a surreal whirlwind. Mia was whisked away from the ballroom by Julian Croft and a team of public relations specialists before she could be torn apart by the piranhas of the press. They sequestered her in the one place she never thought she'd see again, the celestial penthouse. It was now to be her temporary residence and office. The vast, empty space felt even more intimidating now that she knew it belonged to her. The panoramic view of the city, once a beautiful spectacle, now looked like a kingdom she had no idea how to rule. She spent the afternoon in a daze as lawyers explained the intricate details of the trust, the franchise agreement, and her new legal responsibilities. Financial advisors walked her through balance sheets and profit margins that made her head spin. Her signature, once used to sign for tips on credit card slips, was now scrawled across documents worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Imposter syndrome wasn't just a quiet voice in the back of her head. It was a screaming, bellowing giant. She was a waitress. She knew how to fold a napkin into a perfect swan, how to balance 6 plates on one arm, and how to spot the difference between a genuine complaint and a guest fishing for a freebie. She did not know how to approve a multi-million-dollar budget for quarterly renovations or negotiate with the city's most powerful unions. That evening, after the last of the advisors had left, Alexander Sterling appeared at her door. He was dressed more casually now, in dark trousers and a cashmere sweater, the titan of industry replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful man. "I imagine you have questions," he said, his voice gentle. He walked over to the great window and looked out at the city. "I have one," Mia said, her voice small. "Why?" He turned to face her, his grey eyes searching her face. "I told you. You reminded me of something I'd lost." "That's not a good enough reason to give someone a hotel," she countered, a spark of her old no-nonsense self returning. This is insane. I'm not qualified for this. I'm going to run this place into the ground. You've made a terrible mistake." "No," he said firmly. "My mistake was letting this place become a soulless machine. I don't need you to be a Harvard MBA Amelia. I need you to be you. I need you to lead with your gut and your heart. The experts, the advisors, Mr. Croft, they can teach you the business side. I can teach you. But your core competency, the very thing that got you here, is something that cannot be taught. It's character." He walked over to the coffee table, where a week ago he had stared at the picture of his family. 5 years ago, on our anniversary, I took my wife Lily and my daughter Rose sailing. A sudden storm came up, a freak squall. We were hit by another boat, a freighter that didn't see us. I was the only one they pulled from the water. His voice was quiet, devoid of self-pity, a simple statement of a world-ending fact. I spent 5 years hiding in boardrooms and at the bottom of a bottle. I owned dozens of hotels, but I had no home. When you helped me that night, you weren't just taking me to a room. You were the first person in 5 years who looked at me and didn't see a billionaire or a tragic figure. You just saw a man who was hurting. You brought me back inside in more ways than one." He finally looked at her. "I'm not giving you a hotel as a reward, Amelia. I'm giving you a tool, and I'm asking you to fix what I broke. Can you do that?" Looking at the deep, lingering pain in his eyes, Mia finally understood. This wasn't about her. Not entirely. This was his penance, his path to redemption. And he had chosen her to be his instrument. The weight on her shoulders shifted. It was still heavy, but it now had a purpose. "I'll try," she whispered. Her first day as the official owner was terrifying. She moved out of the penthouse and into the general manager's suite of offices, Mr. Davies's old territory. The staff she passed in the hallways looked at her with a mix of fear and curiosity. She was a ghost from the downstairs, now haunting the upstairs. Her first meeting was with the department heads. They sat around a polished mahogany table, their faces carefully neutral. Antoine, the imperious and celebrated head chef. Eleanor, the stern, unsmiling head of housekeeping with 30 years of service, and a half-dozen others. They were professionals who had been running their departments long before she'd ever served her first cocktail. "Good morning," Mia began, her voice trembling slightly. "I know this is unorthodox." Antoine the chef, a formidable man with a thick French accent, spoke first. "With all due respect, Madame la Propriétaire," he said, the title dripping with skepticism. "This is madness. You are a waitress. I am a Michelin-starred chef." What could you possibly tell me about running my kitchen? The challenge hung in the air. This was her first test. The old Mia would have shrunk. The new Mia, the one holding a portfolio full of legal power and the trust of a broken billionaire, found a strength she didn't know she possessed. "You're right, Chef Antoine," she said, her voice steadying. "I can't tell you how to create a perfect Bordelaise sauce or how to plate a dish, but I can tell you that for the past 3 years I have listened to guests complain that while your food is brilliant, the wait times are abysmal. I can tell you that the kitchen porters are using broken dishwashers and are terrified to report it for fear of budget cuts. I can tell you that the servers have to walk an extra 50 yards to the pantry for linens, because the storage closet on this floor was converted into a private office for Mr. Davies's assistant. I know where the cracks in this hotel are, because I've spent 3 years falling into them." She looked around the table, meeting each of their gazes. "I am not here to tell you how to do your jobs. I am here to give you the tools and the support to do them better. My door is open. No issue is too small. We are not just a business. We are a team. And our mission is hospitality. That starts with how we treat each other." A slow change occurred around the table. Eleanor, the head of housekeeping, who had looked at Mia with pure contempt, now had a thoughtful expression. The head of engineering jotted down a note about the dishwashers. Chef Antoine, for the first time, looked at her not as a waitress, but as a leader. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "The dishwashers," he said gruffly. "They have been a problem." It was a start, a tiny crack of light in the fortress of their skepticism. Later that day, Mia left her new palatial office and did something no general manager had ever done. She went down to the staff cafeteria during the lunch rush, took a tray, and sat down at a table with a group of nervous housekeepers. She asked them their names. She asked about their families, about the faulty vacuums, about the supply shortages. She didn't make grand promises. She just listened. Word spread through the hotel like wildfire. The new owner was in the cafeteria. The new owner was walking the service corridors. The new owner remembered the name of the night shift pot washer. She wasn't a myth in a penthouse. She was one of them. The fear began to recede, replaced by a tentative, fragile hope. That evening, exhausted but invigorated, she stood in her office looking at the same city view. It no longer looked like an unconquerable kingdom. It looked like a challenge, a responsibility. It looked like home. The crown was heavy, but for the first time she felt strong enough to wear it. From a rain-slicked alley to the owner's suite on Park Avenue. Mia Vance's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth isn't defined by our job title or our bank account, but by our character and the choices we make when no one is watching. It shows that compassion can be the most valuable currency of all, capable of creating ripples that change not just one life, but the culture of an entire institution. In healing a stranger's hidden pain, Mia healed her own desperate situation, proving that the simple act of seeing the humanity in others is a superpower. For Alexander Sterling, her kindness was the catalyst he needed to reconnect with the world he had abandoned, turning his immense wealth from a shield into a tool for redemption. What did you think of Alexander's grand gesture? Was giving her the entire hotel a reckless, emotional decision? Or was it a stroke of genius to install a leader with true on-the-ground experience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were inspired by this story of drama destiny and the incredible power of integrity, please hit that like button, share it with a friend who needs a lift, and be sure to subscribe for more incredible stories that feel like they're pulled from real life. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.